So for me, drinking was the fast ticket to adulthood. The playground and its muling habitués were not for me. And I couldn't wait to be sophisticated, and I sought that glamour and excitement. And I found it when I moved to New York City. I finally got the life that I had fantasized about growing up in a small town in Texas where, I was living in the charming brownstone apartment in New York City, and I had a man who loved me, and I had a career working with writers as opposed to being a writer. And we were throwing parties on a regular basis. And it was a great time. I mean, it was like those parties that you see in old movies. The people showed up, we broke out the booze, we had a ball, and I still wanted more. I was starting my career in publishing, but I was also starting my career in drinking and partying. And as that took off, the artistic ambitions just fell to the side till they completely dwindled. And so they just went away.
That's just what I've always thought. Drinking's just about the worst thing you can do.
I started having problems, which also caused more depression, which I didn't realize that it was the alcohol that was doing that. I just thought it was things not going well in my life. I was having more and more nights where I would say I was going to have a couple of drinks after work, and 2 drinks turned into 11 drinks, turned into staying out all night and maybe buying some cocaine. And then I got fired. And I was so devastated over the humiliation of being fired. I felt like I had reached the end. I had gone as far as I could in my publishing career. My artistic dreams to write and perform were long since dead, and all I could do was drink. At that point, suicide was on my mind almost every day. It was the last thought when I passed out at night, and the first when I came to in the morning. But I didn't have the guts to do it. And I kept hoping for divine defenestration, some magical force to pull me from my bed and toss me out my 10th floor bedroom window to the street below. And then I just lost it. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. And I looked in the mirror and I saw a ghost of myself. And I just said, I'm done. Done. And I grabbed a bottle of Ambien sleeping pills, and I poured a tumbler of vodka on the rocks, and I emptied what remained of the pills into my hand, and I looked down at the little blue pills like they were the deep end of a swimming pool, and it felt like when I was a kid, and I was standing on the high dive, too terrified to jump into the water below. But I did what I did in those days, and I forced myself by not thinking about anything except for what I had to do. Just jump, I said to myself. All you have to do is jump. And then I swallowed the pills, and I closed my eyes, and I took a big gulp of vodka, and I jumped, so to speak. And then my partner, Micah Hayes, found me, and I went to, I spent a week in detox. And then my mother, Mama Jean. Mama Jean, when I was a kid, was like a movie star to me. With her raven mane of hair that was done once a week to a tease, she was our small Texas town's answer to Elizabeth Taylor. And she had always been onto my drinking. So as soon as she got word of that, it terrified her, and she hopped on a plane and came to New York immediately. And I went off to rehab for 60 days at Mama Jean's expense. So when I came back from rehab, I kept getting what I call the 7-month itch. You've heard of the 7-year itch? Well, it was a 7-month itch for me. And something would happen where I would drink.
Nobody knows how dry I am. Nobody knows how dry I am.
And then I guess it was 3 years after rehab, Mama Jean started slipping away. And when she went completely haywire, hit bottom, if you will, I did what she had done for me, and I hopped on a plane and I flew down to Texas where she was, and my father had hospitalized her. And it turned out that her mind had been hijacked by Lewy body dementia. And think Alzheimer's, only weirder and worse. And during that first visit in the hospital, I'm not even sure if she knew me. At one point she looked at me and said, "With your pretty red hair, you almost remind me of." And then she trailed off. And then she grabbed my arm in a vice grip and she pointed a finger at me and she said, "You've been drinking." And I said, "No, I haven't." She said, "Don't lie to me." I said, "I'm not." And I wasn't, because at that moment, I was 7 months sober. And I was struggling to finally get a year, because all that time since rehab, I had not reached a year sober yet. And I said, "Remember, Mama, that's all behind us. You took care of that. You got me to rehab. I have you to thank." And then I thought, if you can't stay sober for yourself, do it for her. And that was the push I needed to make that final decision to stay sober. And I turned and I looked at her in the eye and I said, "You don't have to worry anymore." And she said, "Okay, but promise me, promise." And I said, "I promise." And 5 months later, she died, and I finally got a year sober. After I had been sober, I started writing again. And I started thinking about some of those artistic ambitions that I had discarded so many years ago. I enrolled in a writing workshop, and I started a memoir about my two most defining relationships, booze and Mama Jean. I started performing some of the stories from the book, and then I realized, I could turn this into a show. Whoever said you can't get sober for someone else never met my mother, Mama Jean. It's impolite to ask gay men how they met. The answer is rarely polite. Humor is the only way I can tell a story. I know, a cliche straight out of Valley of the Dolls, but the prescription on the bottle read, "Take as needed." I followed directions. And to me, I think if you can't see the humor in a situation, you've kind of lost sight of hope. Because to me, humor is a sign of hope. What I hope that people take away from Dangerous and Wet is relating it to their own experience, whether or not they have a similar relationship to their parent or to their child, or whether or not they are struggling with substance abuse or they're in recovery. But they can identify with the emotional experience of the story.